Matters relating to the EBS tied agents. I want to welcome Shane Kavanagh, Cormac Butler here this morning, and before calling on you to give your opening statement, I want to advise the witnesses that by virtue of section 17(2)(I) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of their evidence to this committee. If you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that where possible you should not criticise nor make charges against any person, persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or it identifiable. Members are reminded of long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or an official either by name or in such a way as to make them identifiable. I want to thank you for coming along today, Mr. Kavanagh and Mr. Butler, and can I ask you to give your opening statement, please?
Good afternoon, Deputies. Firstly, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you here today. I represent a number of former EBS agents, many of whom have given up to 33 years committed service to EBS Limited, formerly EBS Building Society. All have suffered financial and personal stress as a result of the difficulties experienced by EBS itself. Our reputations were also impaired, even though we were committed to an honest service and recognised the importance of the duty of care we owed to members. The EBS tied agency business model of EBS is unique to EBS in the Irish market. The tied agent is an independent business entity, exclusively tied to EBS. They sell the full suite of EBS products and operate on a licence agreement with EBS and are regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. The customer experience is the same as that from an EBS branch outlet. The branding, the look and feel and the back upper office operations are all the same as with the branch, and the business is run locally by a local agent and local staff. Beginning in 1935, the Society built up a very positive reputation among its members. Agents, including myself, were paid commission for the mortgages and the investment products that were sold. We had no control function over whether the mortgages were approved or not. However, from the commission from the mortgages that were executed, we covered the costs of the running of the agency, including the office rental, the staff, all the usual costs with any small SME. In January 2011, the management surprised the agents and the network in general by introducing an incentive scheme which focused on maximising sales. There is potential for incentive schemes to encourage mis-selling. Potential investors may buy unsuitable products without fully realising the risks. Under the new structure, the survival of agents depended heavily on the commissions they generated instead of focusing on ensuring that the needs of the members were actually met. In our view, the incentive scheme was too short-term in focus, far too short-term in focus at the expense of the long-term reputation of EBS and their agents. After expressing our concerns, one non-executive director offered to support us. An independent investigation was proposed, and sadly both the report that was concluded that happened and the terms of reference were not made available to us, so this initiative was of limited use. A second underlying but equally important problem was the inability of EBS to provide mortgages that agents couldn't sell. This resulted in a considerable loss of commission and put the agents under pressure to make up the shortfall by selling investment products, which is a very unsatisfactory situation to be in, as the desperate desire to earn commission from investment products may weaken the fiduciary duty that agents owe to their members. As Cormac Butler will explain, there was a few policy decisions taken by EBS which in hindsight contributed significantly to the avoidable problems that EBS and their agents faced. We did speak with the Central Bank, the officials from the Central Bank, and we note the comments from a member of the Irish Bank Officials Association, it's now the Financial Services Union. The problem is widespread. The Central Bank is now attempting to examine and change the culture of the Irish banking, but there is considerable hurdles in their approach. We have attempted to engage with EBS in the matter, but after 7 years trying, a solution seems unlikely. I'll thank you for listening, and I'll pass you over to Cormac Butler.
Thank you, Mr.
Good afternoon. My name is Cormac Butler. I'm a risk consultant based mainly in the UK. I cover issues like the Basel Accord and the International Financial Reporting Standards. Previously, I've given evidence to the UK House of Lords on the UK banking crisis. The failure of EBS to originate new mortgages has put considerable pressure on the tied agents. Many were not able to meet the commission targets from investment products and risked compromising their reputation through aggressive sales in order to make up for the lost commission on mortgages. There were a number of weak policy decisions taken by EBS which might have contributed to this problem. EBS faced closure from the capital markets when it came to raising funds and in the end had to receive government bailouts as well as cut back considerably on the amount of mortgages it offered, a factor that caused considerable distress to the tied agents. One matter that contributed to the banking crisis that is not yet corrected is the obligation to reveal the financial position of the society to existing and potential investors and depositors. According to some, building societies are not allowed to reveal their solvency position, with the result that it will be very difficult for them to attract investors and fund mortgages. The cost of capital for Irish banks is unusually high, and this is because investors do not find Irish banks a safe and attractive proposition. The result is that tied agents cannot sell mortgages as they once did. EBS received a state bailout of about €2.3 billion and suffered a 57% discount on assets sold to NAMA. Its failure to attract funds forced it into a fire sale of assets, which in turn led to further losses. Tied agents were naturally unready for this change in circumstances and, in my view, would have benefited considerably if the correct financial position was disclosed. I am convinced that the difficulties of the tied agents could have been avoided if the directors were permitted to reveal their financial position correctly at an earlier stage. There is a lot of misleading information on this matter, which I believe your committee should look into. In the UK, there are the same concerns. Thames Valley Police Commissioner Anthony Stensfield has suggested examining how banks measure their solvency and believes that many financial transactions may be overturned unless this matter is corrected. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Butler. Can you tell me, Mr. Kavanagh, in relation to your opening statement, you talked earlier on about the independent investigation was proposed. Sadly, both the report and the terms of reference was not made available to us. So this initiative was of limited use. Did you actually engage with the EBS in the context of that comment, that report?
Absolutely, yeah. We engaged with an outside agency who was hired by EBS to I suppose, facilitate the report. Well, we never seen the report. We weren't allowed to see the report, and we weren't allowed to see the terms of reference either, the final terms of reference. So we actually have no.
So the outside agency was to examine the complaints that you were making,
yeah,
and the issues that you had.
Yeah.
Before you entered into that process, you were not shown the terms of reference.
No.
And then after that process, you were not given the report.
Yeah. No.
Did you not have a meeting with EBS then after that?
Well, we tried, but there was no engagement. We were
Well,
told there was not, to be honest, we were told there was nothing to see. Which is.
But can I ask you then, in relation to your meeting with, he's now the CEO of AIB, because I did ask him about this, and he said that he had met you, or met your group, maybe.
Yeah, he met two of my colleagues. He didn't meet me personally. At the time, I wasn't allowed to meet him. He felt it was inappropriate that I met him because it was a legal thing, so he wouldn't meet me. But he did meet some of my colleagues, two of my colleagues, with a representative from EBS. And we did put this to him, but we were told there was nothing to see. Or the guys were told, the two representatives were told there was nothing to see.
So you're saying that, how long ago was that meeting, by the way?
That meeting was, it's about 3 years ago. It's about 3 or 4 years ago. I have the date there exactly, but yeah, it's a couple of years ago.
So you would have met him then as CEO of AIB?
Well, he wasn't CEO at the time. He was a board director of AIB. He since became CEO. But he wasn't a CEO at the time.
In what capacity did he meet you at that time?
As board director of AIB.
And was he the one appointed to attempted to resolve this, or was it just
No, he
appointed to have the meeting?
decided to have a meeting, yeah, just to hear what we
And
had
at
to
that
say.
meeting, were you shown the report?
No,
Did he talk about the content of the report?
no.
So, you've been making complaints and taking up the issue, but literally nothing has happened to
Stonewall.
actually deal with it.
Correct.
And you haven't had a productive meeting with the bank
No,
since then.
correct.
Have you attempted in recent times to meet the AIB?
I won't lie, I've trees burnt down at this stage writing letters, trying between to both AIB and the Central Bank to try and get resolution to this.
And no response?
No, like you get the normal response that, from the Central Bank that they're reviewing it as part of their day-to-day supervision or their supervision, but other than that.
And is that the current position?
Correct, yeah. Like we haven't had any, response at all. It's
What legal challenges are going on? I don't want to go into them at the meeting.
yeah, well, a number of agents have legal,
Individual cases?
correct, yeah. But they're going nowhere, to be honest, because we just don't have the backing of that they have as regards financial clout.
What do you see as a resolution to this?
It wouldn't take
Feel free, Mr. Butler, to contribute if you wish. Yeah.
yeah, like to be honest with you, a proper engagement, proper meaningful engagement would solve this. Like even in one particular case, and I won't go into the details, the judge actually recommended mediation, but that particular case has gone nowhere.
I know that you're joined by your colleagues in,
Yeah.
in the public gallery.
Yeah.
How many are actually affected? What's the number involved here in terms of the group?
You're talking 15 agents all across the country. Many of them have small families.
So 15 agents across the country that have given fair service
Absolutely.
to the EBS,
Yeah.
who have taken up their issues with the EBS and presumably of late with the AIB and the Central Bank,
Yeah.
are just being left hanging there,
Correct.
is probably the best way to put it,
Yeah.
and are being ignored
Yeah.
in the hope that you'll go away.
Correct. Yeah.
That's astonishing. So you're before this committee, you've made your opening statement. What I would invite you to do is, with some of the points that you've made here, if you had relevant documentation, or not to snow us under with documentation, but to give us some of the effort, an outline of the efforts you made to meet with the banks.
Yeah, no
that
problem.
met with no reply. An outline of the response from the Central Bank, for example, would be helpful to us.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to do that
Okay.
as soon as possible.
That's no problem. Yeah.
It is, I think, the intention of the committee to examine this and to pursue it further with the bank. So it would help us to understand fully the background to this if you made that information available to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. No problem. We can do
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Senator Conway Welsh.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and thank you for your presentation. I certainly agree with the Chair in terms of to do further scrutiny. We would need some more supporting documentation. But
Yeah.
I just want to ask you, when did you move to the actual commission work? Was it when it was state-owned, or was it previous to that?
Well, no, we always were, since we became agents, we were always in I suppose, the commission framework from the point of view of any business we execute as regards mortgages and savings, we would have got a commission from it. Our concerns happened in 2011 when effectively we were told that lending was dried up, there was no more lending to do, and they wanted us to basically focus on, we'll say, a bank assurance, which was an investment model selling. And we had a number of concerns as agents, because I suppose you have to understand the culture we came from. We were a mutual building society, and we didn't have customers, we had members. And there was that care for the members. And I suppose we were always told that maybe 10% of our client base would have been suitable for that kind of product. And now we were told, get as many people as possible in it's a numbers game now. You know, we have to survive, we have to sell, and this is the future, and this is the.
Have you documentation to support that and to support your response to it?
I do. We have plenty of documentation. Like we can show you. I suppose just it's only a simple thing, but you know, there was even when you went to manager meetings, you know, it was the name of the game was selling. It was all about sales. We weren't allowed to engage with mortgages or people who were in financial difficulty. We were told to leave them alone, that they were going to waste your time, you won't make money on them, focus on sales. And that was an awful thing, really, because we had a huge amount of trust built up with our members at local level. Like, people trusted us for years, and to be able, like, when somebody comes in and you've given them the mortgage, you've helped them through the process, and now you were told that if they come in trouble, don't engage with them, send them to head office, send them to a call number, and don't let them waste your time. We just didn't feel that sat right with us from the point of view of the culture we came from. And it did upset us. It actually upset us that we were turning our back on our customers. Because don't forget, we lived in local communities and local towns. And these were people who we knew. We knew their families. We did their mortgages for, you know, people all over their life cycle. And now we were told, don't engage, you know, send them off to Dublin. And we didn't like that. And we raised concerns about it. And it wasn't that we were being negative. We just felt it wasn't the right way.
And in terms of the incentive schemes that promoted you to mis-sell to customers, what you're saying is there was pressure put on yourselves,
yes,
to mis-sell products or to sell products that weren't suitable to the consumer.
Yeah, well, no, there was. I suppose I want to be clear on this. The products that were being sold, for the right person, there was no difficulty with them, for the right customer. But it didn't suit everybody. And we would have known our customer base for years, and we would have known who would be happy to go into these products and who would be very, I suppose, safe and want their money safe. And you have to remember, it was 2011, there was a lot of fear out there. And, you know, if you think back, like, there was the whole guarantee and is our money safe, and that was the year that it was. And all of a sudden we were told, you know, the money is guaranteed, as in your deposits are guaranteed, but we need bank insurance products sold. And we just raised concerns and said, look, that's not going to suit everybody. And it was a numbers game, and look, it was either comply or good luck. And that was the reality of it.
And did everybody comply?
Well, no, I suppose at the end of the day, there was a fear, there was intimidation, and I don't mind saying it, but there was intimidation put on the agents.
What type of intimidation? Okay.
Like, I don't know whether I can say this.
Okay, you can, anyway, we will have to, we look at this supporting documentation.
Don't want to get into...
No, I understand, but, you know, and I'll just finish at this, it kind of paints a very, very worrying picture from a number of perspectives, and I think we will examine the documentation further and see how this can be examined.
Yeah, and I would say, like, if you've seen a number of agents get in the door and it looked like we did something wrong and we put their hand in the till and we didn't, but if you see a number of agents get in the door and they're just literally, and I mean this, we were thrown out the very same as a bucket of dirty water down the gully. It was as simple as that.
Maybe I'll just finish it on this in terms of the meaningful engagement that you want from this. What would you hope that the outcome would be as a result of the meaningful engagement?
Well, certainly vindication and appropriate redress. That's bottom line. Vindication for how we were treated, especially with the people in our local communities.
Thanks, Senator. Deputy Murphy?
Yeah, just one question. Obviously, it's a very unique business model from the point of view of the banking sector for EBS. Would it make sense from your point of view and from the point of view of your staff if you could simply be brought into the fold of EBS, employed as managers through EBS, have the staff on union agreed salaries, etc., as opposed to the continuation of this effectively franchise type approach by EBS?
Well, it certainly should have been for consideration, and it certainly should have been discussed. And I would, knowing from talking to other agents, it certainly would have been something the agents would have certainly engaged with management on at the time, if it was put on the table, but it wasn't put on the table.
It was never put on the table as an option?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Senator Burke.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'd like to welcome. These were commercial ventures, I suppose, that were entered into, going back to when, between the EBS and the agents.
Yeah, I suppose the model itself started probably in the, I don't know the exact era. I know I joined the EBS in '99, but it was around, it was sometime before then I started the model itself kind of came into fruition. And in around '99 it started to grow the model, and it seemed to work very well for a lot of people. And
the agreements were negotiated at various stages over different periods, so
there was an original agreement, and then they changed the agreement in 2007, and that caused a bit of controversy.
With no input, was there any input from your group into the changing of the agreement?
The only input we had was that we didn't like the terms of it.
Yeah.
There was no consultation. The original agreement, and this is an important point, the original agreement had a clause in it that the agreement couldn't be changed without the consent of both parties. And then all of a sudden in 2007 this new agreement came out, and there was no consent of both parties. It was a case of sign it or go.
So you were dictated to from the CEO or whatever of the EBS?
Well, that's your word, yeah, dictate, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And then the aggressive sales, when was that brought in?
It came in as part of, I suppose 2011 it really kicked off. In 2011 it really kicked off. They were working their way up towards it, I suppose. They were kind of gradually, but then in 2011 it kicked off. And as regards lending that was going on, it was pretty much stopped, and the name of the game was bank assurance and investment product sales.
And have you set out a case as to, we'll say, how much you might be entitled to, or what you have missed out on, or
well, we'd all know that hurts. Yeah, individual. Like every case is
each case is individual.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
And what I would say in that regard is the people I represent, the agents I represent, are all very reasonable people. It's not going to break the bank, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Well, I agree with the chairman that if the further documentation, they should send it to the committee, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Senator. Deputy McGrath.
Thanks, Chair, and I apologise, I was in the chamber speaking, so sorry I'm late, but I'd like to welcome Mr Kavanagh and Mr Butler and members in the gallery as well. And if I ask anything that's been asked already, just cut me off, Chairman. You would, and you'd be justified, that would be okay. Yeah, look, I've been aware of this issue for some time and would have raised it in the past, even going back to Michael Noonan's time as Finance Minister, and the response then and the response still from the Department and the Minister is that EBS is arm's length, nothing to do with the Department. All commercial decisions and operational decisions are a matter for the institution, and so there doesn't seem to be any political will to become involved in this dispute. I mean, I have an understanding of what the issues are, but if I can just ask you to clarify in terms of what you think would justify redress and engagement from the EBS side. Do you think the treatment of the agents was it in the nature of being unjust and unfair, or do you think that there were breaches, actual legal breaches of the contract that was in place? How would you characterise it?
It's certainly unjust and unfair, and certainly unethical. And I suppose from a fiduciary point of view, and I know that at the last meeting the CEO did bring up that point in relation to shareholders, but we have that same responsibility to our members as agents, and all we were doing was I suppose bringing that to their attention. The contract side of things has yet to be properly sorted out. EBS have always maintained that they're within their legal rights, but has never been proven before the courts. So as far as I'm concerned, it's easy to make that statement until it's actually proven differently. So our primary concern and our main thing was, at the time, we acted in a very ethical and professional manner, and we brought issues that we thought were concerning in relation to our clients. And for our troubles, rather than having meaningful engagement and rather than listening to our concerns, it was very much a case of, right, you're not a team player, you're gone. And it was that ruthless. You're not a team player, you're gone. You're not going to play the game, you're no longer a team player, you're gone. When we asked why we were gone, it was very simple. What we asked was, did we do anything wrong? No, it's on a no clause, no fault basis. Why can you do that? And the answer was very simply and very callously, because we can.
And legally they could under the contract?
Well, unless it's proven otherwise, and as I say, it hasn't been tested before the courts, so...
Okay.
But they've taken a very legalistic approach. Sorry, Cormac,
I just want to add something on the contracts. When the tied agents signed into the contracts, at the time, I think about 80% of their commission came from mortgages and 20% came from investment products. Now, as we know, EBS got into difficulty, liquidity difficulty and solvency difficulties, and as a result, the mortgage commission went down to close to zero. So that was more or less a drop of close to 80%. Now, my view is that if this wasn't expressly stated in the contract, EBS should have alerted the tied agents as far back as 2005 that there were potential liquidity problems, that they may not be able to fund the mortgages, and therefore your entire income would come from investment income. Apart from putting a strain on the tied agents, there is the risk that if their income is solely dependent on investment income, they will be tempted to sell products which are unsuitable to the customer. So it put the tied agents into a difficult situation. If they were to go along with this and keep their heads down low, they might keep their jobs, but they were risking their reputation and creating damage for potential customers with this new approach. So my view is that the EBS should have said in 2005 and certainly in 2008 that there are potential liquidity difficulties and we're going to have to deal with that and maybe consult with you. But the contract you signed is now going to change considerably because of this change.
Okay. Just briefly, Chair. So are there legal cases currently in the system or being taken?
There is, yeah, but they're going nowhere.
Have they got a hearing?
One or two of them have got, I suppose, an initial hearing, but it's been kind of playing games with stuff like discoveries and stuff like that, you know, just pushing it out, just playing games, basically. That's the only way I could describe it, really, you know.
Okay, you don't think that you'll get the justice through legal actions?
I don't have
for the former agents?
I don't have the financial ability to
yeah, I understand. And
none of us do, you know.
Can I also ask then about the new agency agreements that were entered into? So when you and other former agents were removed, the selection process that was used then by EBS in entering into new tied agency arrangements, how was that conducted in your view? And is there a suggestion that they had certain preferred people in mind to take on the role?
Well, it's a very good question. I suppose initially I'd like to just elaborate the background for a second, because you have to understand the culture we came from. Like, yeah. there was a very strong relationship with the agents and the management of EBS all over the years. And when it came to this new agreement, when we raised issues, it was kind of like, nothing to concern. Don't be worrying, lads. Everything is grand. You've been with us for years. Don't be worrying. It's fine. And that was the kind of reaction we were getting from management. And it was kind of like, you know, and that was the spirit of the agreement. You know, there was no one kind of, I suppose, predicted that we were literally, the rug was going to be pulled from underneath us. So that it was the spirit of the agreement. I would say we certainly was definitely withheld from us anyway, because we were kind of hoodwinked into believing everything was all okay, and you've been with us for years, and sure, we're not going to do anything to you. And that's an important point, I think, in relation to the contracts, and that's the way it was dealt with at the time. Sorry, you asked another point. I missed. There was a second. Was there?
The selection of replacement agents.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. When the non-executive director met with us and we raised our concerns, a memorandum was issued to the board of EBS at the time. And in that memorandum, because we have seen a copy of that memorandum, I can share that with the committee, it was clearly stated that there was a board decision that 20 underperforming offices would be closed as part of a EBS restructuring plan for the EU. And we understand that, that's business, I understand all that. But the reality of it is, the agents that did actually lose their contracts, a lot of them offices are still open, and they're still running, and there's still people in them. And we would vehemently deny that we were underperforming, and we also have proof of that. We weren't underperforming. So it was kind of used, look, we're going to close 20 offices, and this was we were the example to use, basically, to cut the office, or to close the office, or cut the offices. But as I say, many of the offices are still open, so that argument doesn't stand up, you know. So yes, I would question, and in our opinion, it's only our opinion, certainly there was a kind of a personal side to the determinations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Chair, I would support the committee doing more work on this issue, and I think we need to hear directly from EBS in front of us. When I look at the note that we got from them, it's unsigned, there's no name next to it. Every time we engage with AIB and we ask about EBS, they say, well, we speak for EBS as well, but EBS is a separate legal entity within the AIB structure, and I think they should be here directly to answer questions on this, and I would support that.
Senator O'Donnell.
I want to welcome Mr. Kavanagh, Mr. Butler. Can I just, AIB have taken over, I know it may have been asked, but have you found a change in improvement in the relationship with the fact that AIB now own EBS? It's part of the AIB family.
I couldn't answer that. I'm no longer part of the network at the moment, so I couldn't answer that question, to be fair. It would be
Mr. Butler?
No, I wasn't. I'm not directly involved with EBS.
And the question, I suppose, just to pick up a few small points, right? You said in January, I wasn't here. What year was that? Which January?
2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said that a second line, but equally important, with the inability of EBS to provide mortgages that agents could sell, non-executive directors. Who were the non-executive directors? What was the type of products that EBS were not providing, right? And you said that there was a few policy decisions taken in EBS which with hindsight contributed significantly to avoidable problems. What were those policy decisions? And just, I suppose, to summarise, Mr. Kavanagh, from your perspective, obviously with a business, I don't know if you've spoken about your own situation. You might just explain for you, how long were you a tied agent with EBS? How did you build up the business? Were you operating from a town, city, village? And how did over the years, and if you take that period really from probably about 2002 on, what happened? What were the changes? Like, you were at the coalface,
yeah,
right? You had people coming in. You were processing mortgage applications for people through EBS. I was in practice at the time. We had a lot of people that would have come through. Come through their person they would have known. Many of them would have been auctioneers in towns. So just give us, I suppose, a personal perspective on looking through the prism of those years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Kavanagh, that maybe you might take a general
absolutely.
view on this and not mention names. Just
no problem at all. Well, just from my own perspective, I started working as a branch official for EBS directly at the front counter, so back in 1999.
You were an employee of EBS?
Correct, yeah.
1999?
In 1999, and worked in customer service then as well, and worked in a number of different offices. I was actually on the relief panel at one stage where if there was a staff member short, and I used to go around. So that was my starting point. And then, I'm not exactly sure at the time, I think it was around 2002, 2003, I began to work for an actual agent of EBS who asked me to go work for him as his assistant manager in a local office. And from there, I suppose I became, I grew my own reputation within EBS for being what I would regard as a very good employee or a very good worker. And then in 2006, there was a kind of a call to the network in relation to growing the offices and growing the business, and they were looking at other opportunities. And I suppose in my wisdom at the time, I saw a greenfield site, and I went to EBS with it with a kind of a plan and said, perhaps this is an opportunity to open an office here. It's a growing, affluent area, etc. And they actually listened and eventually agreed and said, yeah, absolutely, yeah, let's go for it.
That was 2006.
And the process started in 2006, and then they agreed maybe around 2007.
So it was at the peak.
Yeah, and where we were going into was a shop centre, and it wasn't properly constructed, so it didn't
And
actually.
the structure within EBS, were you an employee of EBS or were you self-employed?
Initially I was an employee, then I worked for an agent, and then I became self-employed.
Okay.
Yeah. So does that make sense?
And the building itself, did you rent the building? Like you, for all intents and purposes, were you the lease was in your name, the overheads, it was your business?
Well, actually, no. What happened was the lease was actually in the society's name, and I was the licensee of that lease. So the cost still came to me. But that's the legal.
And just to move from there, because really you were at the cockpit of when things went over the cliff.
Yeah.
So you might just explain what it was when you set up and how the changes with the relationship with EBS and so forth.
Yeah, and I suppose I did elaborate earlier on it, but as I say, we came from a mutual building society background where, as I said to the rest of the deputies, we didn't have customers, we had members. It was all about care for the member and proper customer service. So it was about growing that membership locally. So you were using your trust, so you were building a trust. So you were building a proper, steady business based on proper fiduciary rights and fiduciary duties as a person who was in a financial position to do that, or in that position. And yeah, look at thinking back on it, like we had, there was some. Our customers, and I mean this, our members we had some great clients coming into us, and we had great business with them. And there was nothing to stop that business continuing to this very day, but they just wanted to change the structure and basically convert them from safe products into what I would regard as non-safe products. The products were okay if they were sold correctly and if they were sold to the right people, but they did not suit everybody. And we weren't selling shoes here, we were selling complex financial products. And that's the bottom line. And we weren't, as I say, we weren't selling shoes, and they wanted sales. And we didn't like that model.
We set targets?
Absolutely, set targets.
And and when you say that you were selling incorrect products to the customer, right? Define that. Give me an example.
Well, I put it this way. And this is a real life example, and there's no names or anything like that, but there was a situation where we would be supervised to make sure we were selling and actively selling. And if you had somebody who had a lump sum investment, but they were they wanted their money safe, we were actively told to try and get some of that money into a protected bond. Now, if you were selling a protected bond, the word protected means you would assume your money is protected. But in the small print, it's only protected after 5 years. So if you want it before then, it's not protected. And we were given instructions to make sure that our paperwork was right, from the point of view of when you're completing the paperwork, you word the free text box. In other words, the piece that you're putting in, and you put it in such a way that you decide it. So even though I'm telling you to put your money into there, and you trust me because you've dealt with me all your life,
the wording,
and Shane's a nice fella, and you don't mind him, and you trust Shane, and sure, whatever you say, Shane, because some customers were like that, they trusted you. And I'm not saying people did that, but the opportunity was there to do it, because you're under pressure to get your sales. And you put somebody into one of these products, and you chose, and you were made aware of the charges, and you have been told that after 6 years or 5 years your capital is protected, etc. And that's in the free text box. And that's manipulation, because if the client suddenly 2 or 3 years down the road decides, hang on a minute, I didn't want that, and he goes to the abundance man, and the abundance man looks for the copy of the paperwork, everything is in favour of the bank. And I just felt that was very underhanded, and so did the rest of the agents. And when we queried that, we were basically thrown out.
Can I support, Chairman? There's a body of work to be done here. Thank you.
What I'm going to ask you to do is, because out of the exchanges you had with the various members, is you referred to the terms and conditions earlier on. You referred to an incentive scheme. Then you were terminated, your position with them. You might give us a note without, accusations or anything incentive, but let us know, as you were doing there with Senator O'Donnell, just exactly how the general body of people that were tide agents, how they were affected. You know, an overall note on that. You might tell us you gave us the number of the legal cases, but how many agents are there now? Tide agents were there. How many of those are now taking cases, so that we have information on it when we deal with the banks?
No problem.
You then, Mr. Butler, if you would maybe fill out a little bit on the 3 paragraphs that you gave us. The decision taken by EBS, then you went on to talk about the banking crisis and so on, and then you addressed the 2.3 billion. I think if you can give us members a deeper sense of the points that you're making there. What I suggest to the members this morning is arising from what they have asked. We give a right of reply to EBS, AIB. We talk to the central bank. We send them transcripts of this meeting, and that we arrange an appropriate engagement with each one, AIB, EBS, and the central bank, in order to determine how we can move forward from where we're at right now. So this is a first meeting to get agreement from members. We have that agreement. They're the steps that we will take. And in all of what you said, I have found it extraordinary that the investigation that you entered into, or that you were going to process, that neither the terms of reference or the final report ever emerged. And I think that in terms of the legal cases, that the challenges that are there, you know, I can't help but think that those on the other side of this argument have legal muscle and money, and that might be a way of dealing with you. And I think that that's unfair. And I think a bank that has got 2.3 billion certainly is answerable to this committee and to the central bank and the regulator, need to be far more accountable than what they've been to date. And that's my view on it. And I think the members are anxious that we see more information and that we engage as soon as possible with the central bank and the AIB. So I want to thank you for coming to the meeting today, for opening this paragraph of the investigation, if you like, and to thank your colleagues, all of the tide agents, all of the families that have been affected. And I appreciate you coming here, and we look forward to engaging with you again. So thank you very much for coming along. And we'll suspend the meeting now while others come in.